Our featured BBB Wise Giving Alliance accredited charity seal holders for this episode are Habitat for Humanity International, World Vision, Salvation Army World Service. To find out more about these and other BBB Wise Giving Alliance accredited charity seal holders, go to give.org.
You're listening to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor, powered by bbbgive.org. Here we explore the motivations that form the basis of giving and service. We inspire generosity and celebrate the transformative effects that giving and service have on the human spirit and on community. The conversations featured on the podcast also uncover giving strategies that educate and provide tools to help listeners make impactful gifts of both their time and money. We hope you enjoy this episode.
This is the Heart of Giving podcast, powered by bbbgive.org. Give.org is the nation's standards-based charity evaluator, and it's your one-stop source for information on giving and reports on the most asked about charities. I'm Art Taylor. You know, in the American economy, and I dare say the global economy, the key to making it all work is being able to get a product or service to a market so that people can know about it and ultimately buy or consume it, right, or invest in it. And yet we don't think about this, and no, donors probably don't think about it as much when it comes to charity. But believe it or not, charities have to market as well. They have to market because they need people to know about the services that they're offering, right? Or they need to attract people to invest, donate to their programs, or volunteer. And if they're advocacy organizations, they need to market to specific, particular types of individuals and people who might be supportive of their particular theme for their advocacy work. So marketing is key. And so what I thought we'd do today is talk to someone who certainly knows marketing. He's lived marketing most of his career, and he is indeed now the CEO of the American Marketing Association. And that is my friend, Bennie Johnson. Now, Bennie and I were colleagues when he was the chief marketing officer at the Council of Better Business Bureaus, where he did a remarkable job elevating the BBB brand to new markets and making a legacy brand much more knowledgeable and acceptable to younger audiences. He also did a remarkable job reimagining how the BBB could connect indeed to many of its national partners. We also got to work together on a number of charitable initiatives in the marketing space. And I was always impressed with Bennie's creativity and his brilliance, frankly. Bennie's one of the smartest people that I've had the pleasure of working with. So Bennie, welcome to the Heart of Giving podcast.
Oh my goodness, my friend, you far too kind. But yes, it's great for us to have a chance to sit down and talk about marketing. And I will say, admittedly, everything you said is spot on, but I'm biased. You know, I have a deep love for marketing, and it's the way I've always approached the world. But today I'd love to talk about it, not just from a passion state, but also give you the evidence on why what you said is true and only becoming truer.
Love to hear about that. But Bennie, let's talk about you for a minute. When you talk to Bennie Johnson, some things immediately pop out. First of all, this guy's really smart. He's a great communicator, and he has ideas that abound. And so the question that comes to my mind is,
right,
I'm thinking about you as maybe a 5 or 6 year old kid. And I'm thinking about how your parents dealt with you.
Yes.
And those in your world, you know, with this kid who's probably driving them mad with all these new ideas and strange things that he wants to do. How did your parents deal with you, someone so obviously talented, and I guess what they call in today's world, I don't know, special.
They may have called me that, but God bless them. My parents were incredibly supportive, even as I grew up. And even if they didn't understand what I was interested in or talking about, they understood what it took to give me a platform to explore that, succeed, and grow. So, how did they keep me busy? By finding every program or opportunity to put me in, by filling my room up with every bit of Lego or pen and paper or access to things. And, this clearly is pre-internet time. So they found ways to do that. Then they gave me a couple of siblings to kind of burn off the energy as well. But what was really kind of dynamic in my household is my dad was a mathematician and engineering by training, and my mom was an educator, an English and Spanish teacher. So education was always important. So in that, they encouraged the intellectual curiosity. And for me, somewhere around I started to gravitate towards this notion of marketing. I never knew the words, right? I didn't know what marketing was, but it made sense in the way I looked at the world. And it was a world through entrepreneurship and strategy and new ideas. Once again, that wasn't the language of a 5, a 10, really even a 15-year-old, but it was the way in which I thought about the world around me. So I started off thinking about, if we did X, we could do Y, and this could be better. I would kind of draw into how people built companies or try to understand how things were crafted, and then see opportunities on my own. So I started my first business, which I was a kid, and it was asking a teacher for permission to sell candy on the school bus trip. That is, I don't know if that's special art. It's definitely strange and not normal, right?
It's not unusual.
But a lot of times when I was doing these things, people would just be stunned in that moment. And it made sense, so they kind of let me go. And I'm really thankful for the fact that I had supporters around me in my parents and family and teachers who, even if they didn't understand what I was doing, they just kind of let me go and gave me the space to do that. So yeah, my first business was selling candy on a school bus trip. And I knew enough to know that if you went to a wholesale place, you could buy candy cheaper. I knew enough of my 4th grade math to do the analysis and figure out how much it cost. I didn't understand product placement or positioning, with a nod to the great marketing legend, Philip Kotler. I didn't understand the 4 Ps, but it made sense. How do you promote? How do you engage? How do you deliver something better or more dynamic? And so that's always been a part of how I've navigated the world, through this lens of marketing, and marketing as entrepreneurship and innovation.
Yeah, well, there's also this part of you. You were raised in a family that was connected to the church.
Yep.
The Christian church, the Baptist church, I dare say.
Yep. I'm a preacher's kid.
Preacher's kid. So how did that maybe shape how you see giving back? Or did it have an influence on your connection to service?
It did. And the obvious answer is yes. The immediate answer in the moment of it, I didn't think about it that way, but I grew up in a household in which I saw my parents actively serving in a variety of ways, right? I grew up in a household in which I have 2 younger brothers and there are 3 of us. But at any given time, we always had a 4th or 5th brother there, where my parents were bringing in students and family and other folks in, right? I saw, much like yourself, being committed to university. I grew up and my dad was serving on his university board in all these different ways. We saw them growing up. When I was younger, we had a Cub Scout leader actually run away with the money. Now, you don't know that as a kid. You know you're doing Cub Scouts and then you're not, right? I saw my dad step in without having any experience of a father in his life or any experience camping, come in and take a group of my friends and actually turn it into a Boy Scout troop. The interesting thing is I still have deep friendships with all those guys that I grew up with. We were commenting the other day of that group. There's a group of us, principally African-American and Latino men, who grew up in Washington, D.C. at a time in which that wasn't the expectation that you would grow up. And it's having a space in which a group of us are now CEOs and executive leaders and dads, right? This was a powerful thing that we all had in common, sitting at my dad's table where he would make food for us in the morning, because that's how he paid for his way to go to school, making food at what you would call a greasy spoon then. And he would do that with us. And I look back now at a friend of mine in New York, we were talking, and we're both CEOs of organization, and having that flashback on how unusual that experience was and how shaping and formative it was for us. So then extending that to the church base in there, because of course the Boy Scout troop was connected to the church, which connected to other service. So, I remember growing up and being active in not only serving from an education standpoint, how do we encourage education in our community, but also being there to meet people where their needs are. So spending Saturday morning working with those who are unhoused and those who are in need, spending time of, knowing that there was always an open door. So these are all these ways in which service grew up. But as a person who was interested in business and operations and controls, I would always see that there was an opportunity that something could be done better. Something was missing to achieve those missions and spaces in there. Like, how do you think about this in a different way? And so that for me was really formative. But what I saw was that it's not always about you, right? That's an enduring message in that I saw in these ways that were sometimes micro, sometimes macro, right? It was like kind of growing up in there. And I hope that in my own ways, I'm able to do that with my family and kids. The service may look different, but the impact and spirit is still there, right? The service may be serving on a board in which I can help guide organizations to achieve bigger goals. That's using my superpowers in the space in there.
Well, I also know that if you think about marketing,
yep,
churches do serious marketing, right?
Right.
Because ultimately they're out to save souls. And you must have experienced marketing at a very guerrilla level as your church situation had to grow and expand, right?
Well, it's interesting because, I said I grew up in an environment, the term marketing was never used.
Yeah, right.
But what you're doing is you're doing work that's mission driven, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're doing work that's about engagement. It's about acquisition. It's about community building.
Yeah.
It's about reinforcing of principles and norms. These are all terms that would make sense in a charitable context, make sense in a mission driven concept. But as concepts, they're really at the core part of marketing,
mm-hmm.
right? Marketing is about, in one level, I always think about marketing as these three moments simultaneously. It's both art, science, and magic, right? It's that the dynamism that comes into it, the unexplained part that goes into it. So yeah, when you're working in these spaces and you're building support around a cause, that's cultivation and message and marketing building, right? That's community building. When you're driving to action, how do I move from awareness to engagement to action to repeat engagement? These are all kind of life cycles that go through. How do I then create incredible fans who go out and spread the message, the meaning, or the good word, right? Those are all kind of the same drivers and spaces. And you get a chance to see it writ large. And what I love about our world and what marketing is meant for me is being able to see through sometimes the veil or the clutter to connect the dots, to see that the marketing work, that the engagement work that happens at a community level is connected to the engagement work that happens at American Express, is connected to the engagement work that happens at Lego, is connected to the engagement work that happens at any top brand, right? The similarities in building, reinforcing meaning in your audience, the power of community, right? These are all kind of principles that tie through, and really good marketing in a contemporary sense leans into that. These are the areas that are really important as you think about marketing going forward. And what often happens and has happened is that marketing isn't in the vocabulary often for our benevolent work, right? It's not in the vocabulary, but it's definitely in the practice. And how do we, if we can't talk about it, then we can't amplify it, hone it, and accelerate it, right? How do those things, how do they mean more? I remember my wife and I once working on Vacation Bible School, and we were like the young couple there. My wife's an educator and engineer by training, and I'm a marketing and a strategist. So they put us together and we reimagined how you approach Vacation Bible School. And I remember looking at the results in there and having a 4-fold increase in the number of kids attending, being able to deliver more, changing the programming, because we were treating it with the disciplines that we had as marketing and strategy, as engineering and learning. and seeing that allowed us to deliver against the mission. What were we trying to do? Were we trying to solve for multiple community needs? We were creating a safe space. We were creating educational improvements. We were creating new efficiencies and how do we bring people in, cultivate, build, and grow year over year. These are all marketing, if you will, principles.
So, Benny, I want to ask you a couple of things. So first, I want to jump into what people need to understand about nonprofits and marketing and why it's so important.
Right.
And then I want to talk about what organizations might be missing out on who don't market effectively, who tend to say, we just don't have the money to invest in marketing right now. We got to focus on programs.
Right.
What do you say to these organizations? And then what do you say to people who probably don't make the connection between the need for marketing and success for a social cause?
I'll approach it a couple of different ways. So I'm going to start off and put a pin in it that marketing is both a mindset, a skill set, and an impact set, right? So when you start thinking about it as a mindset and space in there, to be imaginative, to be strategic, to be aware and intentional doesn't cost you anything, right? It's invaluable, but it's a positioning in which you first start an approach. And all organizations, whether they are nonprofit, B Corp, startup, for-profit, those are tax designations. Those aren't designations of your goal and objectives in what you're trying to achieve. Marketing is about moving from here to there in dynamic, intentional ways. It's about amplifying your space. It is sometimes about raising just awareness, but that's really not your end goal. Your end goal is actionable research. It's in people understanding your purpose more. It's people investing in the space more. It's knowing how to move from that proverbial point A to point B to point C and beyond. You know, one of the things that we mentioned before, if you don't have the language in there to experience in marketing, it's easy to think this is not for me. It's too expensive. I can't afford it. I don't understand it. The reality is marketing is the lens, the vocabulary, and the way in which successful organizations thrive and achieve, period. Hard stop right there. Whether you understand it, and oftentimes I love thinking about it, the need and impact for marketing is like gravity. You don't have to believe in it for it to take effect, right? Mm-hmm. There's marketing happening, whether good, bad, or indifferent, around you and your product, whether you identify it. I think the opportunity, though, for nonprofits is to understand that being intentional and strategic about how you approach your engagement with your audience, your mission, and the world around it is critical to you, both your short-term and long-term success. You know, the data is clear that often your $1 million donors start off as $200 donors, right? Now, those are just basic numbers in there. Let's pull it out and genericize it. It means that if whatever is meaningful for your organization, it may not be $1 million, it may be $500,000, it may be $50. Whatever that meaningful ongoing gift is, it's not the beginning point. It's a reflection of a relationship that's been built through marketing. If the gift at the $200 or the $50 or the $5 falls through in terms of customer expectation, experience, embrace, you know, how you move through, these are all kind of knowing and building around your customer. These are all core marketing principles. If that falls apart, you never get to the bigger gift, right? That initial gift is always an investment/test. And marketing should be a part of that conversation, right? It's not just raising the flag of this is our idea, this is our good space. There are lots of good ideas and good spaces. It's about amplifying in such a way that your audience can see. It's about building new audiences and bringing them into the life cycle of your organization. And it's cultivating those relationships over time. If in some charitable spaces, you want a mission driven where your end goal is solving for something, right? If you're looking for a cure, your end goal is to actually cure and in effect make yourself obsolete. But you get there by building the coalition in space. For many other spaces, it's ongoing maintenance in which you can't get there by having new advocates, new donors every other month, right? You have to then build meaningful relationships that become generative. And so marketing provides a lot of framework about how to think about that, how to communicate, how to meet customers where they are, how to build them on a journey and a path, how to be more sophisticated about managing your resources around that. Marketing, the science part, allows you to see what's working, what's not, what can be tested, what can be expanded. It's really a robust space in which I think it's a misstep for organizations to think they don't do marketing or they can't do it. Because once like gravity, marketing is happening around you, whether you believe it or not. Your competitors are marketing, and that's saying about you without you having a voice. Your complementers are marketing. Your internal staff and team are marketing. So what you want to be able to do is embrace that so that your audience, whether it's your employees, your donors, your givers, they understand and can internalize the purpose of your business, the purpose of your mission, to take that through. So pulling it all together in there, marketing, yes, today, tomorrow, and beyond, right? It needs to be that space in there. And as we look at the landscape, it is so competitive. If you're a charitable organization, not marketing is really signing the end of your initiative. And we all do this work because we believe fundamentally it's important, right? That's kind of my view of the world and shrinking it down and thinking about where it is.
And now it's time for our Giving Tips segment with Bennett Weiner, one of the world's most renowned experts on charity accountability and the COO of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance.
The BBB Wise Giving Alliance has, for the past 7 years, conducted a donor trust report, which is a special survey of the public where we survey online an audience of over 2,000 adult Americans, as well as an audience of 1,000 adult Canadians on various issues concerning the charitable sector. This year, we focused on charity accountability issues as a special part of the survey. And one of the things that we wanted to identify was what were the priority accountability elements that donors are most concerned about. And what we found in terms of the top 3 issues, of course, the top issue is how the charity spends its money, with 76% seeing that as a priority area for them. However, right up on its heels as being a top issue for the public is whether the charity's appeals are truthful, accurate, or not misleading at 73%. So we certainly, in terms of the evaluations that we do, look at finances as well as many other issues, because we do have 20 standards that address a broad spectrum of accountability areas. The message is clear that donors are not just concerned about finances, but are concerned about the accuracy of the communications they're getting from the charity. And so in the future, it makes sense, if charities want to strengthen their accountability with the public, that they should give another careful look at how well they are ensuring oversight over the content of the fundraising appeals, the website disclosures, and social media messages to make sure that they're accurate, truthful, and not misleading, both in whole and in part.
So we just came out with a study recently, the latest donor trust report, which I commend to people. You can find it at give.org. But one of the biggest takeaways of this survey, which we do every year, just trying to assess the extent to which people trust charitable organizations.
Right.
One of the big takeaways this time was that something like 73% of people feel that it's important or very important for charities to tell the truth in their messaging.
Yes.
And in their appeals.
Yes.
And yet we do, as consumers, accept a certain amount of drama or dramatic presence in our ads, right?
Right.
How do you draw the line, though, between what may be an obvious attempt to sell you through entertainment versus a truthful and concise and accurate appeal? How do you draw the difference between that?
Well, I think they're just different things, right? So the statement of truth, which should be a heart, of in advertising, and we both have a good BBB core training to know that 100 years ago, you start with the notion of truth in advertising. Jokes aside, but not behind and beneath the ad are fine. Ultimately, you need to deliver on that purpose, right? The truth and the space in there. The challenge that charities have is typically humor has a short window there because often we're pushing the topics that are just so serious.
Yeah, right.
That humor seems out of form, right?
Yeah.
But there's always a space in there. And I think that's where the creativity comes in being able to market. But I think at the heart, there's an ethical consideration that you should always have truth within your advertisements. If you're going to make a claim, you need to be able to back up and support that with data and research and space in there. But what I think is interesting, I think that research, not knowing all the details of it, I think it's speaking to a concept of truth and not a footnote of fact, right? So the difference in the footnote of fact is it is this, this proves that to you. Truthful is, am I telling a story that reinforces it? Am I having images and messages that are truthful in that intention, which I think becomes a part of it. So that rub can be, I've assembled a bunch of facts, but they're bundled in such a context that it feels deceptive. It feels like there's a trust barrier that's been eroded or stretched, right? And so we know that it takes years and not just time, but also proximity and repetition and expectations being met to build trust around brands. And so I'm using the brand language, and that brand may be your offering, your mission, your program, your organization. Any of that, the initiative, those are all kind of in this umbrella of brand. While it takes all of that time to have hard forged trust, it takes only a matter of an errant tweet, a misaligned message, a spokesperson, or the perception of impropriety for all of that to collapse. And so it puts an extra importance on making sure that the facts are the facts and the context reinforces truth in the work that you do. You may have people who take a shortcut and think that will drive short-term investment. We know that if you're talking about work in a charitable purpose, that short-term gain can have deep, long-lasting problems. You know, when you look at the donor class that you're building in, or look at the relationship you're doing, you're also often advocating on behalf of others when you're working in a charity. So you have that trust relationship as well. So it's the donors, the stakeholders, and the work you do that I believe it's important for charitable organizations in particular to reinforce those trust matrix.
Do you find it surprising at all, though, in the marketplace that we have today, that people believe that telling the truth is so important? I know that sounds really weird to say that. Of course, we want people to tell the truth. But given all of the misinformation and madness going on in social media and other places,
Yeah.
do you find it surprising that people still have that expectation?
No, I don't. I mean, you think about it, in our world, we have the ability to have hyper-personalization, which equals an increased level of intimacy. And when we start talking about trust, this is language of intimacy, right? So my expectation is that you're telling the truth, therefore I can trust you, right? I trust you and I want to believe that you're telling me the truth. Like, those are the reinforcement points. And with all of the modern mayhem that we see, right? All of the kind of disinformation, reinterpreted information, things devoid from truth in there, trying to get us to move in action. And especially if that action is removing us from resource, having us invest in something, buy something, give something, it makes sense that that's going to be expectation, and it's going to be greater, right? Our exchanges are all about trust, and it's not always money. Sometimes it's my information and my credibility. That's part of a trust exchange as well.
Given the landscape now with things like the onslaught, I guess, of artificial intelligence,
right,
and new communication tools, what are marketers talking about, and what are they concerned about given all of this?
First of all, I think marketers aren't different from other professionals in the sense that, oh my goodness, the world is changing. What's really interesting is machine learning, algorithmic learning, AI have been a part of the marketing tool set, the advancing tool set, for at least the last decade. When you look at search engine optimization, look at a lot of the tools that we have. But it was roughly a year and some change ago when OpenAI dropped ChatGPT that this new world of generative AI was writ large. And marketing has an incredible opportunity and inflection point. There's a lot of tension around it because marketing is one of the first disciplines in which these tools are being applied. And what we're encouraging marketers to do is to have the opportunity to play and engage, right? I remember a dear colleague once before saying that we talk about being in the room and being at the table for decisions and what happens to shape an industry or shape programs or things that are important. And he would always say in a really calm way, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Mm.
And it always pays that. So what we encourage, and what we have been encouraging is for marketing leaders to step up and lead now, right? To understand the parameters that we're going to put around these new tools, to understand the frameworks, the ethical considerations, to lead their teams to be able to play and understand. It's hard to understand a tool if you're not using it and playing around in it. Our change is going into exponential space. That's not the question. Things are going to change. We've talked before that the current AI applications you're seeing now, and this is a technical term, are the dumbest AI tools you're ever going to see, right? It's only going to get better. I was at a demo a couple of weeks ago, and I remember having a couple people go, well, it's kind of chunky, and it doesn't do this, and it doesn't do that. And I'm like, yeah, but this was a first pass, and this was a damn good first pass, right? And if a system's only going to learn, if
Right.
it's doing B+ work on the first pass, what does the future hold? But I know that, and we've seen this in everything else, it's not the tools and the technologies by themselves. It's the playbook and integration we have with human creativity and leadership that help to shape. Now, what we're going to see and what we are seeing is AI is going to and is changing the foundational landscapes. It's changing both the floor and the ceilings space in there. And being adapted in this space is going to be important for not only marketers, but the organizations they serve, the spaces they work at, right? You're going to see a reaction. You're going to see a lot of dynamic stuff that moves us forward. And you're going to see a lot of things that you wish people hadn't done that are part of that evolution.
Well, I'm glad to hear what you said about teams should just play with it. We just launched a tool we call askgive.org,
Mm-hmm.
and it uses a large language model to allow people to ask questions about their favorite charity or about charity in general or about giving or about volunteering or anything that might be on your mind relative to charity. And what's so cool about it is that it doesn't take information from the general internet. It just takes curated information that we've gathered over the years, including our charity report missions and other things.
Right.
And it gives people a great answer to any question that they might have. And if it doesn't know, it says, there may be some other places you might want to look for this answer.
Mm-hmm.
And we've also said to it, there's some answers we don't want you to give.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want you to say, what is the best charity?
Right.
But we want you to tell people how they can find what might be the best charity for them, right?
Right.
And it gives people a source for
Right.
where its answer came from. So if you wanted to do more research, you could find it. So what's so cool about it is that we got to experiment, we got to play, and we picked a project that has little to do with efficiency, little to do with taking away a person's job, but how do we serve our population more?
Right.
How do we make our information more accessible to people? And I think that we will ultimately be rewarded in the marketplace, so to speak,
Right.
for helping people,
Right.
for having a project that's human-centered.
Right.
And I just think that is at least our hope anyway. And I think in the marketing jargon, human-centered is probably going to be a big way that we begin to rationalize the ethics as well as the parameters, as you mentioned, that we put around these things.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in imaginative play, right? Imaginative play is at the heart of any disruption, whether it's incremental or transformative, right? And the space in there. And yes, there's always going to be tools that make our lives more efficient and space in there. But we don't wake up being inspired to be more efficient, right? We don't wake up thinking about making the world a better place through efficiencies, right? We think about it through those imaginative generations, that the things that we're even talking about today that were only a glimpse into quality science fiction in a few labs 30 years ago, right? That are now a part of our everyday ethos. And then it allows us and gives us a tool set of what can I do now that I couldn't do before. I think back and looking at our own children in space in there, the vast amount of knowledge that's at their disposal now took us several outdated encyclopedias to only get a tenth of, right?
Exactly. And I just think that, as you say, we're just at the beginning stage of all this.
Very, very much so.
We're just at the beginning stage. And so where we'll be 10 years from now, who can say? Now, even 3 years from now, I just think that 3 years is going to be a lifetime when it comes to the use of this technology. That is assuming we can find the electricity to keep it going.
It really be. I mean, here's the thing. Innovation begats more problems, begats more innovation, begats more problems, right? We continue to kind of think of that. But what do we do over time? We get better at problem solving.
Yeah.
Right. So no matter what the problem is, we get better at problem solving, which is the space. And when we think about our organizations, marketing is often the proxy for that innovation and problem solving muscle, right? That's why I once again believe it's not just the application of I got more donors to give and more people know about my mission. I've built this community. Those are important key parts. But another part of marketing is it becomes your natural intentional innovation engine.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's through marketing that you often ask what if and why not. Right. Those are innovation prompts.
So I have one last question because we're getting to the end, Bennie. I wanted to just check in with you on how charities should think about partnerships with business these days.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for a long time, we heard that companies are supporting causes that align with their products, services, and their desire to succeed in the marketplace. Is that still the leading case that charities have to make, show that kind of alignment, or are there other things going on that charities need to be mindful of?
I'm a big believer that it makes sense too, right? So I'm fond of saying in any partnership that I believe we need to connect at the mission, right? Do you have partnerships that if you step away in a room, it makes sense? Even if unexpected. I love the unexpected partnerships that become the mashups. But when you walk away, it makes sense, right? You have to have that type of magnetic connection that connects you at the mission. Then it gives you the sense of what type of partner you have. It may be another charity. It may be an association. It may be a B Corp, a startup, or a larger enterprise. You want to make sure that the work that you're doing for this season aligns with the mission in the space. Now, sometimes we're fortunate and blessed enough to have a corporate partner that we've been corporate partners for 30 or 40 years and the lifestyle changes and it keeps going. The reality is it may be something that's for a season.
Yeah.
This is a direct 36 months. This is a core focus of said bank. This is a 36 months. This is a core focus of this industrial group. And you can align the work with it to achieve mutual goals and impacts. In addition to being aligned at the mission, I think the next space is that's starting at the beginning at the heart. I think the next space is reaching out to the end goal in space, beginning with the end in mind. What is the impact we want to achieve? If you can start anchored in the heart and an anchor into what the future could be, what impact is, then you can build all the things in between. You can fill in the specs with creativity. Some of it will take care of itself. Some of it will reveal itself to you while you're working together. You won't realize there's synergies or opportunities until you actually work together. But I think for charities, regardless of the size, this is a good approach. Connecting at the mission, then understanding what the alignment is for the impact and building the right size for that space in there. Companies have strengths and charities have strengths, and it's understanding what works best in that space with those unique needs that happen. But the best of these relationships are like any relationship. They're a work in progress.
Well, Bennie also has a podcast I want to make you all aware of. It's called Marketing / and, I should say.
Marketing and. It's a play on the old improv prompt, right? Yes, and. So looking at marketing and all those other things that connect with marketing. So we talk to thought leaders, innovators, practitioners, scholars, students, anybody whose life has been influenced by this intersection of marketing and the unknown and the unexpected. So I invite you all to join in and listen. We have fun like this, and hopefully we share with you some innovators that you've never connected with before.
No, I love the unknown part because as people know from the conversations that we have here, there's always something surprising that comes out of these conversations that you didn't anticipate. And people always ask me, can you send me the questions before we have this conversation? I'm usually like, no, because we don't want that to we want to create surprise. We want to find ideas that we didn't anticipate. So,
and that's the brew that brings forth the best of these ideas, right?
Yeah.
So I thank you for having me here. I mean, it's not a spoiler alert. I was going to tell you that I love marketing, but hopefully I've been able to share why I do and what I believe is marketing's true gift and impact for the charitable work, the benevolent work, the dynamic, human-centered work that we have before us.
Well, thank you. This has been Bennie Johnson. Bennie is the CEO of the American Marketing Association, and he's also the host of its podcast called Marketing and. He's a longtime friend and someone I admire, remarkable talent, and someone who's highly experienced and very effective in what he does. So, Bennie, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
And to all of you marketers out there who are listening to this, if you have an interest in social good, this podcast, the Heart of Giving podcast, is a weekly show. Every week we have another amazing person on whose story we get to tell in the form of their history, the work that they do, and what they see ahead in the future as far as social good creation. And so we invite you to subscribe to the show and become a regular listener. If you want to support the podcast, we would appreciate a gift. You can go to give.org and make a contribution, and that money will be put to great use. So I hope we'll see you back here next week for another show. Thank you for listening.
You've just listened to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor. Be sure to tune in next time for a brand new episode. To listen to our other interviews, visit heartgiving.podbean.com. That's heartgiving.podbean.com. Subscribe to our show on major podcast platforms. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are the views and opinions of the guests, not those of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance or program affiliates. This podcast is for information and educational purposes only and is copyrighted with all rights reserved. This podcast is protected by Podbean's terms of service.